Hello, and welcome to another Autodesk Alias 2021 Deep Dive session. During this session, I'll be discussing the Retopology tool found under the Subd tab. The Retopology tool can be used to take scan data or surface data and build a subdivision model based on it. I'm going to be building this model from a scan. I'll be building a portion of this model from the scan. And we can take a quick look here at what this looks like as a Subd. And I'll show you how I went about doing that. Here's the scan of this concept car. The Retopology tool found in Subd, Retopo. When you first start the tool, you have to pick a projection target. Now, a projection target can be either scan data or surface data. You can also do flat screen modeling by just hitting the space bar and continuing on in an orthographic view. And I'll show that towards the end of this video. So I'm going to select this scan, and now it's asking me in the prompt line, do I have an existing Subd that I want to update or put on this scan? And since I don't, I'll just hit the space bar once again and we'll be in the Retopology tool. Now I'm going to turn off the shading just because it's not that important to have, to have a lot of color in the model. So all I'm going to do is have the scan turned on, show my model here. I'll dim it up a little bit. Okay, so there's a new hotkey help menu down in the bottom right corner. That gives you access to about 15 tools, I would say, all within this one subdivision tool. So what it's going to allow me to do is with the left button, which is just shown across the top here. So with no, just clicking with the left mouse and lets you draw or move, middle move a loop, and right mouse button relax. And then by using various control shift combinations, we can use many other functions. Now all of these functions are simply extensions from the existing tool set. Okay, so we can use a lot of different methods. I'll show you a few. So I just start placing some points down. Now anywhere I place a point is going to be a vertice on the subdivision control cage. So I'm just going to draw a few along this windshield, and then I'll draw a few matching. Holding the shift key, you can see that I get a preview. I don't know if we've ever seen a preview before on Alias, so this is pretty nice. So when I place the left click right there, it's going to place a Subd face there. So there's one limit surface. And then I just move to the side and I can make some more. Okay, now the vertices are on the scan data. The limit surfaces can actually fall below the scan data, and I'll show you that in a subsequent operation. If you really need to be matching the scan data spot on, I'll show you some tools for doing that. But the concept of this Subd Retopology tool is that you can quickly get surface data to maybe pass to engineering or do some further work on from scan data. It's not necessarily to make Class A surface data directly. We have many other tools that we offer to allow that type of workflow. This is just a quick version of this scan data. So once I have that done, if I hold the shift key, I can see what I could do with the left and the middle buttons. And how you know, so what I can do with if I'm hovering on an edge with the shift key held, if I use the left mouse button, I'll extend one face. If I use the middle mouse button, I'll extend that loop. So I'm just going to extend this loop up a bit, maybe tune a point, shift key. Let me drag this guy up a little bit. Now I can pick, like with the left click, I could move this whole edge, I could move just a point, I could move a whole face, and the entire time that whole model is sticking down to the scan data. So I'm just going to do a little bit of tuning here. How do I know where these vertices should be? I don't. I just place them where it looks like they should be, right? If I get a nice network on top of this, a nice topology it's called, of four-sided faces, I'll get a nice resulting surface. And we could do a shift key, middle mouse button again, maybe bring this back, and bring it back again. Now, if we look at this from up here, we can kind of start to see that you get a little bit of misalignment in some of these vertices. And what I would say is try to get the outer perimeter edges kind of nicely where you would want them to be. And then I'll show the relax tool, because what the relax, and I want to move this whole edge loop down a little bit just to get the spacing kind of even. But if we look here, do you see how there's a little bit of zigzag? I'm just going to take the right mouse button, and that just, as I wave it, that just relaxes the angle between all of the edges. So when the software looks at two edges and it finds a acute or an obtuse angle, and then maybe another angle, all it's going to be doing is trying to relax those and make them 90 degrees, okay? It's a pretty simple approach, but it's quite effective in smoothing this stuff out. So if we just hit the 1 key, we can now kind of see that we've built that on top of there. So I'm just going to use the Shift key and middle mouse button and drag this whole thing out once again. All right, maybe down to somewhere near where this A-pillar is. I'll drag this piece up here and maybe drag this up here a little bit. Bring this guy down. Okay. Now, if we go out and we use a couple little diagnostics here, I want to show a couple of things in some diagnostics and a couple of little options here. So I could just go down to my cross-section tool and say I want a new axis increment, and it'll generate one every 100 millimeters. And I'm going to grab this Subd and I'm going to put it on this layer so it's got a different color to it. So now you can see that the Subd isn't really passing through the scan if you look, right? The Subd is falling below, the points are sitting on the scan. Now I am free right now, if I wanted to lift this data, lift these vertices up above this, but I'm going to take a little bit different approach here. So I am now outside of the retopology tool, and just to confirm for you and show, when I built this, I have history turned on, okay? So what is the history doing for me at this point? The history is keeping track of what the reference data was and what the Subd was. And right now, if I add to this Subd outside of the retopology tool, it does have history, but it will not update. So if I go to something like a Move CV tool and I grab a row, I'm free to move that row off of the reference data, okay? I'm just going to Control Z that and show you a next option. If I query edit this tool and I bring up the options for the retopology tool, I could turn persistent projection on. Now what persistent projection means is that when I leave the tool and I try to move a vertice, so I'll just pick this one vertice and try to move it up, it doesn't allow me to move that up. It's only moving it left and right because it can't go up, okay? What that also offers me is if I'm outside of the retopology tool and I do an insert edge, so I'm just going to insert an edge here. Oops, I'm sorry, that was the wrong direction. I want to insert an edge here. When I let go, if you watch, see right now it's below the scan. When I let go, it gets popped up onto the mesh. Okay, so you can be inside or outside of the tool, and right now any changes that I make to this Subd will be projected onto the reference data. Okay, so I'm just going to query at this once again and use the Shift key, and I'm going to add, if we look at our cross sections here, I'm just going to Shift key, and as I'm hovering, if I use the left mouse button, it's going to insert that edge. So I'm going to insert an edge right there. And I might even insert another edge over here. And that's just going to keep bringing up that surface data closer and closer to the reference data. Now that last one didn't make a very effective change, so I might just leave it like that. Okay. And then when I'm done, I could come back and do some more tuning to get this closer to the scan. And I'm going to show that on the body side over here maybe, and show you a little bit different technique than what I just did. So another option here is to just make the minimum. So what is it, the minimum? I'm going to enter the retopology tool, pick this mesh spacebar. I don't have an existing Subd, so I'm going to hit the space bar once again. And I'm just going to put a dot at the belt line, another dot at the belt line, one at the middle of this feature line, down here at the end of this feature line, and shift key and put one face there. And then I'm going to come here maybe to the side view, and I'm going to put one vertex here and one at the back, shift key, and make one more Subd. Okay? So now I have a Subd with only two faces. Okay? So now I'm going to hold the shift key, and I know that I'm going to have to be closer in this side view. I'm going to need more plan view shape. So I'm going to go right here to the middle and add a row, go over here and add a row, and go to the front and add a row, go to the middle here, add one, and I'll stop saying that for you. Go down here, and then I think I might need 1 and 2 up here by the top. Okay. And now if we look at our surface data, we've gotten pretty close. I'm going to turn off persistent projection. Okay. And what that means is I am now free when I leave the tool. I can just move any of these vertices off of the scan data. So I'm going to pick my slide tool here. I'm just going to slide these down a little bit. Let me do the same. If we look across the top, I think I've maybe made it a little too tall. So I'm going to pull this out, switch to CV mode, maybe deselect this one. I'm going to look at the back here. This one's pretty much on, so I'll come out a little bit and shift and deselect, then maybe out. And these are just some traditional workflows that you could always use in Alias. The difference here is that now that we have a subdivision model, I don't have to worry about all the traditional NURBS surfacing tools and traditional workflows if I just want to get a surface model of this scan data. So I'll use the hull move tool. I'm going to move this out a touch. Maybe I'll come here and switch to CV and grab this one in the back. I can see right here, and this is just from a little bit of experience with being able to visualize this. I can see which vertice needs to be moved, and each of these vertices allows me to pull this data out a little bit closer to what the original input geometry was. And once I get it close enough to that input geometry, I should be pretty good. Now, there's a couple of options we can do, and I'll switch here up at the end. I'm also going to come down here and slide. I'm going to slide this down because I see that my high point is right here, and then I'm going to use the move CV with proportional mod. I'm going to select this CV and shift middle mouse button all the way to that CV, and I'm going to be going in with those. And then I will grab this vertice and come out a little bit, and I'm just going to switch to regular move mode. I don't need to be in proportional mod mode anymore. Okay, and I can get pretty close. I'm a little bit off right here. I could add in a couple of rows. I'm just going to use the slide and just bring that crown down a little bit. Okay, and I'm pretty close, and we can take a quick look here at maybe some black and white bars. I tend to like to use the black and white bars and about a 50% transparency. And that 50% transparency lets me kind of visualize the waviness in the scan data and then the shape of my highlight and see how I'm capturing this. And by my estimation, I think I'm capturing the feel of the scan data pretty well here in this case. Okay, now if I wanted to put those points back on the mesh data, I could do that. So I'm going to turn off the shading. Now, when I re-enter the retopology tool, if I just do a right mouse button and just smooth, as I hit smooth, if you look, you'll see how the vertices start getting snapped back down onto the mesh data. Now I'm kind of going backwards and breaking what I had already made, but if you get a radically different scan of the hood or the roof and you already have a topology built, this is how you can just quickly get that topology up onto that reference data and then do your fine tuning after. Okay, so that's kind of a pretty typical, I think, exterior workflow from scan data. So let's switch it up and move to maybe a surface model that we want to retopologize. So I'm going to go in here to my exterior. I'm going to turn off my Subd, turn off my scan, and come over here. And let's look at the front clip now. So I've got a front clip here, and this front clip is just a surface model. So we could shade it here. It's just a surface model. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my cross sections here for a second. And if I had a surface model that I wanted to retopologize, and why might I want to do that? I might want to make a lightweight model of an existing surface model so that I could do some quick proportion changes. A lot of designs are based on a previous design, and to begin to go in and start moving all these surfaces around individually can be a lot of time consuming, can take you a lot of work. So this is just a method for you to be able to quickly build surfaces over top of an existing surface model with Subds. So I'll again go into the Subdivision Retopology command. I'm just going to box select to get my reference data and hit next and hit go. And now I can just start putting my vertices down. So 1, 2, I'm just putting the vertices down along that fillet. Shift key lets me build. Shift key in the middle will allow me to snap those up, and then we can do the same type of operations that we were doing on the scan data. So we got a couple of kinds of reference data that we can use. We can turn on some shading here and see if we can see a quick difference. If you look, the vertices, you can see the vertices poking through. All of the vertices are sitting right on that scan data. The limit surfaces are below, but you're going to find that if you build a nice topology where your control cage follows the surface flow, you'll get a pretty close match, and sometimes you can just scale it up just a little bit to get it to better match your surface data. Another workflow that I would like to use is a pretty typical workflow for building up something that's quite organic. Even a car body, the same technique works. And what you do in this technique is you build some primitives. And these primitives are going to be very basic. So in this case, I wanted to build a helmet. And if you try to build something like this helmet, how do I keep it all on a nice sphere, right? How do I work in 3 dimensions around something that's completely organic? And here's the approach that I would suggest you use for that. So what I did here is I knew that I had a couple of images that I needed to work from. These were based on our XD group. So our experience design group came up with a little bit of a concept here on what they wanted this head to look like. This is the avatar in red if you're immersed in VR, by the way, and built in Alias. Yeah, actually, it's a good story. Built this in Alias before we released 2020. So I built this in Alias with the prototype of 2020 about 2 years ago. So we've come quite a nice ways since then. So I built this basic form, and this basic form is going to be the control for everything else that I'm going to build. Now, if I use these limit surfaces as my base, I'm already going to see this topology, and in my mind, that's confusing. What I like to do in this case is pick this subdiv and go to Mesh, Tessellation, Subdiv to Mesh. And what that does is generates a uniform mesh from this subdiv. Okay, so a very nice even tessellation. It's not based on the surface topology. It's based on tessellating the cage. Okay, so now I can turn the head off, and I just have this very lightweight poly model that has no topology. So I can actually turn the meshes off almost, so I can barely see them. I don't even really need to see them. And what I have now is I can see my curves, and I have an underlying piece of geometry that I can build on. Okay, so we can do some flat screen modeling. I'm just going to turn up the color of these just so we can get a pretty good idea. And Subdivision, Retopo, I'm going to pick this mesh and say go. I don't have a Subd, so I just say go, and I'm just going to start modeling. So here's a couple of tips. Usually in a corner, you need 3 vertices. So like I want to make this helmet start at this center line, and it just needs to be approximate because I'm going to mirror this across the center line and then merge this together when I'm done because I want it to be symmetrical. Okay, so I'm going to pick one point about in the middle and then one point over here and about the middle. And then I'm going to pick one point at about the tangent line and one point at about this tangent line. Then I can put a quad there. Then I can hold the shift key and I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now I can take this and move it over here. Take this and move him over here a little bit. Just to tidy up this as I go. I don't want to create some crazy topology that's going to cost me a lot to fix. Okay. And I like building it up like this also because this way I know I'm not going to get myself into a bunch of weird n-gons because I'm kind of planning ahead a bit. So then I'm going to put one in the corner, one in the corner, one at the opposite tangent and the opposite tangent. And then since we have these other lines in here, I can already do something like this. I can start to kind of imagine how these are going to have to go. And then I just fill in my topology, right mouse button will smooth those a little bit. And then we move down here and we can start to do a similar thing. So I'm going to maybe place one at the tangent. All right. And now I have one over here at a tangent, one at the middle, one at this tangent, one at the middle here. I can make this one and this one. Shift key, 1, 2, 3. Now we could go here. Shift key, 1, 2, 3. Now I might start to just 1, 2, 3, and start building up this topology. All right, and if we hit F1, you can see I'm going to start to get this model. And if we just go back here really quick and I look at, I'm just going to shut this off. If I go back and look at my final, that is basically how I built this entire model. Driving around those perimeter lines, now I generated those feature lines by just using traditional intersection tools in Alias. So I had the base Subd. I did some projections to get these shapes to look nice in 3 dimensions. And then I've got that nice base shape. Now when I make this entire topology to go around this helmet, it's all going to be on that nice smooth form. And then these in the recessed areas and kind of in these raised areas, maybe here around the top where these are raised up and pushed down, that's just using a normal offset in the CV Move tool to make those consistently off. In some cases, I built a surface and used the Subdivision align to surface command. So all in all, pretty nice workflow for going from a nice smooth form that I don't know what the topology needs to look like, and then build the topology on top of that smooth form. That can be used for auto bodies for sure. You make the center of the car, maybe you make the greenhouse stick out, maybe you make the wheel arches push out, because you're trying to find the form balance between all of those different shapes, and then you draw your topology over that on a mesh that's generated from those Subds. It's a pretty good workflow, and I think it might get you pretty good results. And the last thing that I would like to show, if we just go up here to the and shut this stuff off, is if I go to maybe a front view, okay, and we don't need the front clip and we don't need this exterior either. Let's just delete this stuff. With the Retopology tool, I can just work on a blank screen. So if I just show my grid here, I could go into Subdivision, Retopo, and maybe I just had an idea in my head of a shape that I wanted to make. And I just start, first I have no projection target, spacebar. I have no Subd to start with, a spacebar. And now what I can do is just start drawing points. So I'm going to put a few points here. Maybe, I don't even know what, oh, I just decided what I'm going to make. And I have no idea why. Let's put one here, let's put one here, let's put one there, maybe one there. Okay, this is one thing about the Retopology tool, and you can, everything I'm making is on a plane right now. You can right mouse button and it kind of just squeezes this stuff. You cannot make 3-sided faces in the Subd Retopo tool, but you can leave the Subd Retopo tool and do a hole fill on it. It doesn't care. Now, right now, these edges are all not part of one Subd, right? So I might just go, in this case, go to my Layouts perspective window, hit my F key for zoom, look at this little guy, and I might say, oh, you know what? I've got three different Subds here. I'm just going to take this vertice right here, and I'm just going to move that single vertice away a little bit, and maybe move his friend over here away just a little bit. And then I'm just going to do surface, or subdivision, pardon me, bridge, and I'm going to bridge from here to here. Okay, and then I'm just going to do a subdivision weld, and I'm going to say to tolerance and box select those, and now that's going to put our Subd together. Okay, so now we have one Subd. We could take that and, oop, I must not have merged those. Subdivision, weld, and weld those together. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to take that and subdivision, extrude, and I'm going to extrude subdiv edges from here to here, here, here. Let's go all the way around the perimeter. Get these guys picked, and I'm just going to offset a little bit. That's pretty good. And then I am going to pick an edge loop here, shift edge loop here, keep going. The edge loops are not going to chain past where it finds a 4 directions. Okay, so it only can chain if it knows where to go. If it gets multiple choices, it stops chaining. And then I'm going to do a subdivision and crease those, crease subdiv, and maybe grab this edge loop and move it over a little bit. Oops, Control Z, move it over a little bit, and I'm starting to make a, I don't know, dog bone. I don't even know what it is. But you can just do flat screen modeling on anything. You could have an image in the background, you could do just freestyling work. So a lot of functions found inside that retopology tool. It's going to get you a long ways if you're doing scan data surfacing, trying to remaster a model, update a subdivision model to a new scan, any of those types of operation, the Subd Retopo tool is going to be your friend. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you in the next video.